a vintage Spitfire worth over £2 million. Can a team dismantle this World War II icon and ensure it survives a transatlantic voyage from Britain to America without damage?
The journey is out of our control. I can guarantee that they will be worried.
To succeed, they must protect this precious plane from every shake,
have to be very careful that it doesn't tip on its nose.
Hold it.
rattle,
Everything's big, it moves quick, it's all made of steel, and it's very heavy.
and roll.
Last thing we want to do is drop it after this whole journey.
Hold it, well.
One spectacular Spitfire. One team with a mission to move it. Tons of trouble that will test the nerves of the people who dare to do monster moves. Eastern Maryland, USA. The weekend retreat for Washington, D.C.'s elite. Tom Blair comes here to soak up the views of Chesapeake Bay from the cockpit of his vintage fighter. Tom made his fortune founding several successful healthcare businesses.
For numbers of reasons, I became fairly lucky in business. And in my 50s, I went from not being able to afford meat to being able to afford buying the meat store. And all of a sudden, I had some disposable income.
He invests his wealth in restoring vintage cars and aircraft. His multi-million-dollar collection includes a rare World War I Tiger Moth. But there's one particular plane he's dreamed of flying ever since he was a child.
As many young boys, I had an interest in planes and built model airplanes. And looking through a magazine one day, I saw this beautiful plane with an elliptical wing. It was an absolutely stunning plane. I remember when I saw my first Spitfire, I had the same feeling when I saw the Spitfire as the first time I walked into Westminster Abbey. It was just unbelievable. I had chills. And from that day on, I said, I need to fly a Spitfire.
The Supermarine Spitfire was conceived by British engineers on the eve of World War II as a nimble fighter to intercept enemy bombers. The aircraft's distinctive wings, shaped like ellipses, gave the plane unrivaled aerodynamics, while its Rolls-Royce Packard Merlin engine packed a punch, enabling it to reach speeds of over 445 miles per hour in combat. More than 20,000 Spitfires were built. The aircraft played a decisive role in many raids, including the invasion of Normandy, a battle Tom's own father fought in.
In World War II, my father was an American serviceman, and he was stationed in Great Britain. He started dating a young girl, and they were married in 1943. My mom became pregnant with child, me. My dad was off in the invasion of Normandy and was killed a couple of weeks before I was born. So I always considered myself at least half British. As a young teenager, I started to understand the significance of a Spitfire in the Battle of Britain, the significance of the Spitfire to really the British people. I don't think there's been an aircraft in the history of the world that has such a unique combination of attributes. It is absolutely stunning to look at. It performs beautifully. Flown by valiant British fighter pilots, it turned the tide in 1940 and really, many people might say, helped to save a nation.
Today, only 50 airworthy Spitfires survive. Maintaining one of these aircraft costs tens of thousands of pounds a year. In 2003, Tom heard of an old Spitfire in Duxford, Cambridgeshire, in need of some attention.
I went over, looked at it, and absolutely was in awe of the plane and sat in it and could not believe how fortunate I was.
Tom bought the aircraft for over £1 million and invested a further $250,000 restoring it to its former glory. Aviation experts John Romaine and Mo Overall led the project.
It's awkward to hold and it's awkward to handle and it's also very heavy.
I don't want to sign it off until it's perfect.
Tip it up.
Now Tom wants Mo's team to bring the Spitfire home to Easton for him to fly. Transporting this rare and fragile aircraft, nearly 4,000 miles from Duxford to Easton, Maryland, will be a difficult operation, even for this experienced team.
They are machines that have increased in value. They have a lot of personal value as well to the owners, and so we have to really consider very carefully how we do ship them.
Mo's working out the best way to move Tom's Spitfire to America.
You could try and fly the Spitfire across the Atlantic from Duxford to Easton.
But the Spitfire was designed as a short-range fighter to intercept German bombers and shoot them down. Its tank only carries 85 gallons of fuel, and that's not enough to cross the Atlantic. So Mo explores a second option.
You could mount the Spitfire on top of an Antonov and fly it across like the space shuttle.
The world's biggest cargo plane, the Antonov 225, can piggyback heavy aircraft such as the Soviet space shuttle on top of its fuselage. But the aircraft is so heavy, it needs a runway almost 3 miles long to land. The runway at Easton Airport is only half that length. So Mo's team decide to dismantle the Spitfire and ship it to America inside a cargo container. The move will cost Tom £30,000. The team's main concern is that the Spitfire will still be fit to fly when it arrives.
You run the risk that every container is going to be banged or knocked at some point in that shipping process. There's the road transport, ships, the craneage. I mean, the worst case scenario is that the container actually rolls over, and then you really are into a lot of damage.
They'll begin dismantling the Spitfire tomorrow. If anything goes wrong, this pre-move test flight could be its last. In Duxford, Mo's team prepare to dismantle the Spitfire for its shipment to America. They must be careful. Spare parts for Spitfires are hard to come by, so if they damage or lose any, the plane may never fly again.
The first task we do when dismantling this aircraft is we'll remove all the main panels. Splendid.
You have to bag up the screws so you know where they go, because every screw is different.
Every component that's taken off is checked and cleaned and wrapped up. When you're working away from base, you don't want to find any part that's damaged.
So when you get to the other side, it's straight on and you know it's okay.
With its innards exposed, they can begin to take the Spitfire apart. Its unusual design makes this difficult.
The problem with the Spitfire is that the wings carry the undercarriage legs. So once the wings are off, the fuselage is completely immobile.
As the team removes the wings from the fuselage, they also take away the plane's only form of support, making it dangerously nose-heavy. To stabilize the Spitfire, they will take off the heavy propeller first. and build support towers under the plane's fuselage, nose, and tail. Extra towers will prop up the wingtips. With the aircraft balanced, they'll use cranes to lift off the Spitfire's wings.
Okay, go.
With the towers in place, they carefully remove the Spitfire's propeller.
With the propeller on and the aircraft on jacks, it's quite tail-like. You have to be very careful that it doesn't tip on its nose.
Okay.
The propeller is driven by a big spline shaft, and as it's being drawn off, you have to be very careful to slide it off evenly. Because if you knock the splines, worst case scenario, you could shake the engine from the frame.
You go back and up to the side, right?
It would be a disaster if we dropped the propeller. We wouldn't meet the target to get it in the container, put it that way.
The slightest dent on the propeller blade could fundamentally damage the aircraft's flying performance, so they cushion its touchdown. A gantry crane will support the wings while they detach them. They'll lift up the half-ton wings with straps. To prevent the straps from tearing into the underside wing panels, they protect them with padded wooden beams.
Okay. Yep.
These are the 7 main bolts that hold the wing on. They're a very tight fit. We'll get this one out. Do the bottoms now. Can't have any play at all in these bolts because they hold the wing on. Any movement and the wing will start to move on the bolts and elongate the holes. All right. It's always a bit nerve-wracking when the wings come off. We have to make sure everything is trestled very carefully because it's quite unbalanced, the aircraft.
Up.
OK, up and down. Get ready, because I don't know quite what it's going to do.
Right, here she comes.
Here it comes. The wing is the most difficult part to take off because it's awkward to hold and it's awkward to handle and it's also very heavy. OK.
Clear.
Splendid.
One wing down, one wing to go.
Okay.
Yeah. Here it comes.
As the second wing pulls free, a special visitor who knows a thing or two about these aircraft drops by.
The more I see of it, I can't believe that after all this time, there's still Spitfires around and other things are flying.
Jack Forrest piloted a Spitfire on many World War II raids. He's still in awe of the aircraft.
From a builder's point of view, the Spitfires were extremely complicated. The wings are made in such a way that there's a multitude of parts in them, and they're difficult things to manufacture. It was a highly skilled business.
Okay.
That brings back the memories. Great to see these old things around still.
With the wings off, they lower the plane's center of gravity as close to the ground as possible to stop it toppling over.
Okay.
The Spitfire makes a soft landing. Now someone needs to climb inside to unscrew the tail.
I normally get the youngest and smallest to get inside. Tom normally gets the job.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
The Spitfire's shipping container has a massive 80 cubic meter capacity. But John wants to make sure that when they squeeze the aircraft inside, everything is absolutely secure.
You run the risk that every container is going to be banged or knocked at some point in that shipping process. I mean, the worst case scenario is that the aircraft was fundamentally destroyed.
All 5 pieces of the plane will be loaded into the one container. There's a risk that the components could shift in transit, which could wreck the aircraft's chances of flying again. So they'll build special frames to cushion each section. They'll lock the fuselage and wings into an A-shaped frame made from steel. They'll load the tail into a wooden cradle that's been carefully tailored for a perfect fit. A special tripod will prevent the Spitfire's propeller, its most expensive part, from knocking into the other pieces. The frames fit together like a jigsaw inside the container to protect the Spitfire for the move.
Okay, go. Yeah, that's good.
With the fuselage locked into the frame, they secure the wings onto its side.
Can you go up a bit, James? Hold it. Okay, down.
The first wing goes on smoothly. But there's limited room around the side of the hangar, so loading the second will be harder.
I think it'll be all right like this. Uphill.
Okay, now if you go down steady. Hold it. Hold it.
The wings and Mo's thumbs are safe.
Bias the gantry that way as you go, because you've got to go over the container. Hold it.
They must lift the frame over the lip of the container with a crane. It will be a tight squeeze. If the Spitfire's delicate wings bash into the container's steel walls, their aerodynamics could be irreparably damaged.
Ready? Go up a bit more. Okay.
It's going to be tight.
Hold it. If we can get a load of people on the front, just pushing it in as I lower it down. Okay, everybody push in. Keep pushing. Hold it, one, up. Hold it. Thank you very much.
They wedge the frame at the end of the container.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you. Splendid.
With the plane securely packed, the truck's ready to take the container to Thamesport. This is the last time John will see the Spitfire until they unload it in Easton.
The journey is out of our control. We have no control over that at all. The boys that will be going out to America to put that aircraft together, I can guarantee that they will be worried.
On the other side of the Atlantic, Tom's taking one of his vintage aircraft for a spin. America's most celebrated fighter, the P-51 Mustang, shares many of the Spitfire's attributes.
The engine is almost the exact same engine is in the Spitfire. And to stay current and to be ready to fly the Spitfire when it arrives and is put back together, I want to take this plane up for a few hours and reacclimate myself to the Merlin engine.
Clear.
Because the plane is sitting down on the tail, the nose is obviously up. So when you taxi, you really don't have a straight ahead view of where you're going. So you do what is considered S-turning. So you're constantly meandering around like a snake would do to see forward. The first 10 or 20 seconds you're flying a World War II aircraft down the runway and takeoff, you're really flying the engine.
In England, the Spitfire's container ship, the Horst Express, arrives at Thamesport. The Spitfire is transferred to a transporter and taken to the docks. Operations manager Neil Monroe knows that loading the container onto the ship isn't without risk.
You can have mechanical failure, such as cranes. If the container did drop, it would be dramatic damage inside. The balance of the load would probably damage the airframe itself, so it does have to be treated with kid gloves.
And as with any Atlantic crossing, there's always the danger it may not be plain sailing. The chances of hitting stormy swells on the 10-day voyage are high. It's very common for cargo to go overboard during a voyage. The team are pinning their hopes on the Spitfire being stowed safely below deck in the hold.
Obviously, due to the value of the aircraft, we have requested lower deck stowage on this particular container. However, it's not guaranteed. All we can do is request it.
Port Virginia, one of America's biggest seaports. The Hearst Express arrives after 10 days at sea. Joe Harris must ensure the precious Spitfire is handled carefully in the busy docks.
It's a very advanced, very busy terminal. Our cargo is literally everything from soup to nuts. I mean, we get auto parts from Brazil, we get leather goods from Italy. We have trade with 80 countries and 250 ports. It connects Virginia with the world.
Docking the huge ship in this port is a challenge for its captain.
You can see it's moving slow because the channel is only so wide, so it's pretty delicate getting in here. The ship just not deft enough in its maneuverability to make that turn, just to come in and whip around. So the tugboats kind of hasten that. So he's pushing and he's beginning to pull. You can see how he's beginning to track out with that heavy line, and they'll swing it around in pretty short order. Those are not just random toots on the horn, they're actually communicating. Telling them to back on, back off, slow down, or give me a little bit more slack on this end.
Joe will be keeping an eye out for a container with unusually precious contents. But finding the Spitfire in this mountain of boxes will be like looking for a needle in a haystack.
The vessel, while it has all these boxes on the top, has probably an equal amount below deck. And according to this is the Timmsport load plan. I assume all these were all put on in Timmsport, and then it shows all these being vacant. And my guess is that he picked up some cargo and discharged some cargo in New York.
The crane drivers need to be constantly alert to avoid carnage.
As you can see, these cranes move a lot faster than I think what a lot of people realize. And these boxes, they're not measured in terms of hundreds of pounds, they're measured in terms of 20 and 30 tons. So it's a dangerous job. Everything's big, it moves quick, it's all made of steel, and it's very heavy.
Joe hopes that the Spitfire hasn't been unloaded accidentally on the ship's stopover in New York.
The box we're looking for, we believe it's in this row right here, third or fourth up from the bottom. And this is the bay they're working right here. You see these boxes coming off. We think they're stacked right on top of it. That box is probably 2 or 3 down, so there'll probably be a half a dozen, maybe 10 moves, and then they'll get to the box with the Spitfire in it. So they're getting very close.
Just as Joe starts to doubt the ship's loading plan, the Spitfire's container appears.
As far as the guys on the ground are concerned, they don't know that there's a Spitfire in there. That's awesome. It'll get picked up by a straddle carrier. He's going to pick it up, and he's going to take it in the yard, and then the trucker will show up with the correct paperwork and pick it up. There it goes.
Truck driver Maurice whisks the Spitfire away on the final 200-mile leg of its journey to Tom's hangar at Easton Airport.
I've hauled anything from race cars to furniture. Never hauled a Spitfire to my knowledge. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
In Easton, Tom's ground crew prepare for the Spitfire's arrival at his spotlessly clean hangar. His lead mechanic, Franz, is working out how to fit it amongst Tom's 9 other aircraft.
The container is on its way, and so we need to make some room. We're going to move a couple of airplanes around, move some cars out of the way. We have to do that kind of carefully. We're dealing with a lot of valuable airplanes and valuable cars. So we'll get started on that, and the fun will begin. Moved some airplanes around, left some space here for the guys to work. That should be about it with getting situated for the container to show up.
All right, this is the place we've been looking for. I got to call my dispatch and let her know I'm here. She's biting her fingernails, I'm quite sure.
12 days after its transatlantic trek began, the Spitfire arrives at its new home.
How you doing, my friend?
Good, how are you?
All right, Maurice.
We're gonna pick the box up, the container up, the truck moves out of the way, set the box back on the ground, and then we will start rolling the rest of it out of the container.
They've hired a small crane to unload the container, but crane operator Dan is worried that it may not be big enough to lift the load.
Because they're telling me it weighs 28,000, right? Or 18,000.
Probably, yes.
The airplane itself is pretty heavy. Last thing we want to do is drop it after this whole journey.
The winch is capable of lifting 9,000 pounds, while the container weighs 18,000. By adding the block and using a 3-part line, I tripled the winch capacity. So I'm well over the 18,000 lift.
Just as they begin to lift, the wind stirs.
Pretty breezy day out here for the wind. Bird swinging in the wind.
Here it comes. You're gonna have to go quite high. That's it?
You want?
That's it.
One more.
Okay. Yeah, what? A little bit more.
Yep, there she is.
If the gusts get any stronger, the Spitfire could face turbulence before it's out of the box.
With this northwest breeze, as heavy as it is, it's possible when we get it up and the wind hits that broad side of it, it might want to push it over.
Go back that way a little bit.
The big question: has the Spitfire survived its Atlantic crossing?
I'm impressed. It's in great shape. To get this entire plane in and not dented, not scratched, and it's just amazing.
Mo and John have flown in from the UK to piece the plane back together and check it still flies.
Taking them apart is relatively easy. When you're reassembling, you've got to make sure it's right, and there's a lot of testing to do.
I'm quite happy for it to get pulled straight in the hangar at this angle.
We need some manpower.
Hold it, it's on the container. It's going to flick up. Hold it. You're going to have to lift the whole thing. Just got to watch your blades, don't hit.
The frame is stuck in the container.
The problem we've got, can't get a screw out of that left-hand pack of wood. Once it's off the blocks, it'll roll pretty easy.
We've got that tug.
Yeah, that'll do.
Hey, we're going to use the tug to pull it.
Righto, Steve. Hold it a minute. As we're pulling it out, the blocks of wood are coming with it. So we're just going to get a jack to get those out. That's good.
Now take the weight. Worst case, you drag it all the way to the end and it falls out.
If I lever it up, do you think you can pull them blocks out?
I'm not going to let you go between my legs.
No.
So far. Come on, boys.
Okay, I'll let it down now.
They finally prize the A-frame free.
Just steer the back over, Steve. Just till the front wheels get to the end of the wood.
You go a little bit further.
You don't want to have to repaint it afterwards.
Okay. We're going to come out now, Steve. That went well. First stage complete.
The restoration team has just 3 days to reassemble the aircraft before Tom arrives to take it for its inaugural flight.
When you're reassembling, it just takes longer because you are putting an aircraft back into flying condition.
Okay, go.
They carefully remove the wings off the frame.
Okay, this way.
Now they must lift the wings to reattach them to the fuselage. But they've left the wooden support beams they used to protect the wing's underside in Duxford.
We'll just refabricate a new board and be back on track.
Okay. Gonna have to go quite high. Hold it, well, up.
The wing's weight is too much for Franz's makeshift beam.
We have a little wood problem here.
While he makes a new one, they unload the other wing.
Yeah, that's good.
With the new beam in place, they try again.
Yeah, that's good. Right, can we come forward with the wingtip a little bit?
Mo must line the wing up perfectly with the fuselage. The slightest twist on the joints could wreck the wing.
Let the tip come up a little bit. Yeah. Go backwards with the tip a little bit. Hold it.
Tip needs to come down a little touch.
Just squeeze a little bit more if you can. That's it, okay. Okay, go. Just come forward a touch more. Hold it. That's the tail on and finished. Just taking the spinner off, getting ready to put the prop on the aeroplane and do it up nice and tight. It's crucial to get the propeller set up correct so that you obtain the correct RPM. Otherwise the engine could overspeed or come loose. It tends to end in you have to land fairly quickly. Hold it. This nut has to be very tight, okay? I mean, you don't want to go bananas. A bit more. You could, in theory, strip the threads, but you'd have to be an animal. Splendid.
With the main parts reassembled, Mo tests the landing gear. If it's not working, test pilot John won't be able to touch down.
Just make sure the gear goes up and down and locks correctly and that the red and green lights in the cockpit come on and off.
The landing gear is operated by hydraulics which run off the engine. They can't fire up the Spitfire inside the hangar, so they attach a hydraulic pump to the aircraft.
These hoses provide the hydraulic fluid and pressure to the system.
But the American parts don't quite fit the British plane.
We've had to adapt and make do with what we can find. Here, 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 here. But we're going to cover it up with this blanket in case anything decides to depart the aeroplane.
We're ready.
Okay, coming down.
Yeah, those lock pins hold the leg either in the up or the down. If you have a heavy landing or a land sideways or something, then they take a real big load. We'll go for an up. The down is obviously more important than the up, but it's nice to have them go up as well. Splendid.
Tomorrow they will test the engines at full throttle and relaunch Tom's Spitfire into the skies. Only then will they know if all their hard work has paid off. In eastern Maryland, it's the day of the Spitfire's inaugural flight over American soil. Crowds of enthusiasts gather at Tom's hangar to see this vintage fighter take to the skies.
I brought some friends by to see him, yes I did.
You know, they're pretty rare planes, let's face it. I'm surprised they let them out of England.
Everybody should be here if you can. This is wonderful.
I'll be here.
The team is anxious to see if all their care and attention with this move has paid off.
It's always a little bit nerve-wracking when you see the aircraft take off for the first time.
Before John can take the fighter up on a test flight, Mo must fire the Spitfire's engines at full throttle on terra firma.
The aeroplane is producing so much power, it wants to go flying, and we're trying to hold it on the ground.
Mo will run the Spitfire's engines at 3,000 RPM. This will be enough to lift the tail and plunge the propeller into the tarmac. To stop the plane trying to take off, the team will strap the tail down. They'll also wedge a wooden chock in front of the wheels to stop it flying forwards.
If it jumps the chocks, dangers are it could nose over. And if you can imagine that propeller spinning at full power and hitting the pavement, it's going to do a lot of damage.
This is so amazing. What an impressive piece of equipment. Think back about the guys who were protecting Britain in this airplane and what they did in this airplane. It's just unbelievable. The bravery and the skill they had was just, it's unparalleled.
Fuel's off, power's off, brakes are off. All good.
The Spitfire passes its engine test with flying colors. Mo rigs its controls for John to take it up for a test flight.
This is the spade grip, or the control stick. That's connected by cables out to the wing.
Adjusting the tension of the cables that control the ailerons, the movable trailing edge of the wings, is critical. If they're too loose, the cables could slip out of place, leaving John with no means of controlling the aircraft.
Just take a little bit of tension off.
If I get this wrong...
Normally, you have to call the insurance company. Yeah, put a bit more on. Got it?
They lock the final panels into place.
This is the final cowl to put on.
The last piece of the puzzle.
Do you tuck it in, this one?
I don't know.
All right. Steve's starting to fit the fillet bearings.
Different colour screws, half-painted screws. It's like a puzzle. Getting the right screw in the right place.
This is the final cowling screw. Yeah, that's good. That's creme de menthe.
Now, the moment of truth. Will the Spitfire fly?
I've come out here now to do the air testing.
Happy landings.
Thank you. You know, when aeroplanes come apart to this degree, there's little things change. You know, the aileron trims might change, some of the engine parameters might have changed. You might pick up vibrations if the propeller's not right. So we're going to be flying it, settling it down, trimming it, basically getting it ready so when we leave it with Tom, we're happy and he's happy. I don't want to sign it off until it's perfect. Yeah.
Charlie, how far are you going now? Charlie, Roger, just back in now.
You know everything has been done correctly and double-checked, but that first takeoff you always watch with interest.
This is so amazing to see this thing out there flying. It's just unbelievable.
After 2.5 hours of test flying, John touches down with his verdict.
Oh, it was a little bit bumpy up there in places. A little bit of trimming to do on ailerons, but really good first flight. Yeah.
John will need to do some fine-tuning of the ailerons before the Spitfire is safe for Tom to fly.
When we're flying along straight and level, these ailerons are in this position. And to roll the aeroplane, of course, if that aileron goes down, then that's lifting the whole wing. With them neutral, we've got an aeroplane that's rolling slightly to the right all the time. So we need this aileron to come down slightly in the air by only about this much. And the technical manuals on the Spitfire describe how you do that. But fundamentally, it's a block of steel. And then we use a mallet to just bend this up. It's like tuning an instrument. It's a trial and error thing. But I'm thinking that the amount we've got, that could be it. The airflow now, as it comes over here, will just do that, which will naturally put a pressure in pushing that down. So we'll see how we get on with that.
Tom and his wife Alice fly in from Washington, D.C. After 3.5 years of painstaking restoration and an epic 4,000-mile journey, the Spitfire is finally ready for Tom. It's a childhood dream come true.
John. It's always a pleasure.
How are you?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Great to see you.
And you? You well?
I'm perfect now. I couldn't be happier to have it here.
Yeah, good.
It looks terrific.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
Very well.
Good
How
to
are
see you. It's beautiful.
Yeah. We trimmed the ailerons. It's flying lovely and straight now.
Are the ailerons, those are the flappy things on the wings?
Yeah, that's a bit.
Okay.
You wiggle them around.
Here's what. I will when I get it up in the air.
Houston Tower, information Victor, time 1552 Zulu.
Okay, Pat, thanks a lot. Yep.
Wind 230 at 6, temperature 22, sky condition, visibility greater than 5,000.
One of the things that does concern me is I would never want to be the American responsible for denting a Spitfire. I don't think anyone actually ever owns a Spitfire. I think you just take care of the Spitfire for the next person because it is truly a national treasure of Great Britain.
For Tom, this could be his finest hour.
Sounds beautiful.
I'm cruising along and I look out at that elliptical wing and I had the same feeling I think I would have had if I had lunch with Winston Churchill. It was absolutely a memorable moment.
Love the subtitles on the song. Now, a very different sort of shifting awaits you tomorrow as the 8 o'clock heroes come in the form of the removal men from Pickfords. Next up tonight, though, it's CSI Top 10.